One of the biggest issues in interpersonal communications is the issue of listening, something that we're no doubt all aware of, and we're also probably aware of its importance. However, on the other hand, most of us are not perfect, and in fact, the goal is not to be perfect. But on the other hand, the idea is to be aware that listening is an issue whenever we're talking with someone, and be aware that we have to constantly work at listening in order to gain a good understanding of what someone is trying to say to us. There are some well-known problems with listening. The first major problem with listening is sort of a cognitive issue. Hearing is not listening. Hearing is the perception of the voice and other communication that a person is sending to us, but hearing is not the understanding of the message. And listening really involves not only the hearing component, but also the understanding component of the message. So if we think about listening in terms of the cognitive structure of our mind, we should realize that we can think a lot faster than we can hear. So rule of thumb is that our mind is working 4 times faster than the message, the voice of the person who's communicating to us. Given that our mind can work so fast, and given that the speed of the voice of the person communicating to us is fixed, there is a tendency for the mind to wander during a communication. And the mind has to be focused in order to really understand what a speaker is saying to us. So, of course, the first thing is to avoid being distracted. But more importantly, the idea is to try to make sense of what a person is saying to us. In other words, try not to focus on every word or to hear every word, but rather try to focus on what is the message, how do I put together the various pieces of what a person is saying so that I understand what they're telling me. The term that is usually applied to the process of listening in terms of making it more effective is the term called active listening. And that implies, of course, that we are taking some action ourselves in order to understand what is being said to us. So the first thing is to listen with intensity. And what that means is to concentrate. Of course, we all understand what it means when we want to concentrate on something. So in this case, we're concentrating on the speaker, and we're concentrating on the speaker's message. The second thing is to listen with empathy. Empathy is a multifaceted concept, but it generally means in terms of we're trying to understand the emotions, the feelings, and understand the depth of what another person is saying to us. Putting ourselves into their shoes is the way we often talk about. This is something that may come very naturally to some, but for others you have to work at it. But basically the bottom line of empathy in an interpersonal communication is that you don't want to color what anyone is saying to you with your own beliefs. You want to understand what someone is saying to you on their terms, not on your terms. So by putting yourself into their shoes, by trying to understand their feelings, their emotions, what they're going through, as a context of their message, you will get a much better understanding of what it is they are trying to tell you. A key point in listening is the acceptance of what we're hearing. That doesn't mean we necessarily are going to agree with everything that we hear or agree with that other person. On the other hand, if we aren't accepting of their communication, then we may cut it off in terms of our understanding of that communication. In other words, you don't want to be evaluative or judgmental while you're listening to somebody else. The time for judgment may come after you're finished with the conversation. But during the conversation, you want to try to listen as clearly as possible to the message being communicated to you. And the problem with acceptance is that a lot of times people start thinking of rebuttals of what a person is telling you. Your mind is very active. It's going much faster than the person is speaking. If your mind is not concentrated, and if you're thinking about rebuttals to what the person is saying, what you're going to say next, in other words, then therefore you're not listening. The fourth part of active listening concept is taking responsibility for completeness. And what that means is that we as the listener need to make sure that we understand the message. What I mean is that you do what is necessary to understand the message being communicated to you by a speaker. Doing what is necessary could mean just listening empathetically and quietly until you have heard the speaker out. On the other hand, listening for completeness may mean that you're going to intervene by asking a person to repeat themselves or in some other way to explain it in a way that makes more sense to you. Another aspect of taking responsibility for completeness is to try to observe and be aware of the emotional context of a message. In other words, the emotions that a person has, the feelings that a person is trying to communicate are a part of the message. And it's not strictly words and deeds. So try to understand the emotions and feelings. And then finally, ask questions as necessary. Probing questions or questions to repeat something. If you were distracted, you need to go over it again. So take whatever steps are necessary to understand the message before the conversation is ended. Well, listening is a very large subject, and it's very difficult to communicate everything that one could do in terms of becoming a better listener. So I will try to leave with some tips for improving your listening skill. Make eye contact with the person you're speaking with. It doesn't mean you have to stare into their eyes all the time, but the kind of intuitively correct eye contact will greatly facilitate communication. Nonverbal behavior is an important part of all interpersonal communication, but it plays an important role in listening as well. And what I find is that a person will understand through your nonverbal behavior whether or not you're interested in what they're saying. So that's the first point. But more importantly, through your nonverbal behavior, you will induce the person to speak up and get to the bottom of what they're trying to communicate to you. Very often a person will be as communicative as they perceive their listener to be interested in what they have to say. So, for example, in terms of nonverbal behavior, your posture, make sure your posture indicates your interest. Secondly, in terms of things like nodding your head does not communicate you agree or disagree. What it communicates is you're interested. And so when you nod your head, you're trying to encourage the person to say more. Avoid distracting actions when you're listening. Of course, staring out the window while someone is talking is a clue that you're not listening. But playing with a paper clip or doodling around while a person is talking is going to be very distracting to them and may inhibit communication. An important tip for improving listening skill is to paraphrase what a person has said. In other words, you summarize for that individual what you have heard. If they hear that you haven't understood them, they're going to try to clarify. They will repeat themselves or maybe explain it in a different way in order for you to understand better. It's important to understand that while your role in active listening is to ask questions and to clarify, there are some distracting things that you want to avoid. For example, do not interrupt when a person is speaking to you. Your role is to be hearing and understanding. Secondly, don't talk too much. It's the other person who should be doing most of the talking. And if you talk too much, then you're not listening. And furthermore, asking questions is fine, but don't ask too many questions. It interferes with the conversation. In listening, one must confront one's biases. We're all confused by our stereotypes. Stereotypes are a fact of life. We have biases. Not all of us, but some of us have biases. If we allow stereotypes or biases to interfere with our thinking, when we're listening to someone, it may color our understanding of what it is they're saying. This is a job for all of us, and in terms of active listening, is to make sure that we don't allow our biases to interfere with our understanding.
We will witness a debate. The subject of the debate is high compensation for CEOs. The second party in the debate will automatically choose the counter position. As the debate unfolds, each side will make an attempt to listen carefully to the other side. As we listen to the debate, let's see if the speaker adheres to the principles of good listening skills. Things to look for are makes eye contact, avoids distractions, asks questions, paraphrases, doesn't talk too much, and makes smooth transitions.
I feel that CEOs are overpaid. I feel it's unfair to the rest of the members of the company as well as the shareholders, because I feel there's a lot of politics that can go into influencing how much a CEO gets.
Well, I feel that CEOs are justified for that salary because they've proven themselves. You know, they're obviously the greatest managers, or they have the greatest skills, and they have the most responsibility in that company. So I think that it is justified.
If you look at how much how much of a pay jump goes between, let's say, a manager and a head manager, or even just a salesperson and a manager, yes, there is a pay raise there, but it's nowhere near as the enormity of a pay raise that a CEO gets over anybody else in the company.
So what you're saying is that there's an obvious gap between in salary between any other employee in a certain company and the CEO.
Correct.
Okay, but isn't the CEO, like mentioned before, still the best suited for that position? Like, didn't he obviously prove himself to be a CEO?
What do you mean by proving himself?
Well, CEOs are either hired one or two ways. One, they've worked their way up from bottom level, employee to head manager, maybe to the CEO, or they're hired by a headhunting committee, which basically hires the best managers and CEOs out there.
Oh, so you're saying they're qualified for their payment because they've either worked themselves up or because a professional committee was chosen to find the best people for the position have chosen them.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Well, my problem comes in speaking of committees, actually, is that the director of the board is the one who decides ultimately how much a CEO gets paid.
Right.
But there's something called interlocking directors, which I think is a huge problem.
Okay.
Basically what interlocking directors is, let's say I'm the CEO and you're my director. You choose how much I get paid. That's our relationship. It's strictly business.
Yep.
But many times, both a director and a CEO of the same company can be on the board of another company that has nothing to do with theirs.
Okay.
So the problem is that relationship, because on that board, I sit next to you, and we're colleagues, we're friends, we're equals. Sometimes I feel that relationship can really influence how much you choose to pay me as the director to my CEO.
Okay, so what you're saying is because, let's say, you're the director and I'm the CEO, because of our relationship outside of the company, like in a board of a different company, because of that relationship, it might influence you as a director in this company to give me a certain pay raise?
Exactly.
Okay, I understand. Doesn't the CEO still have, best managing skills, the best social skills, the best organization skills?
So you're saying the gamut of skills that a CEO has to portray is enough to justify his salary?
Yes, basically.
I agree with you, to an extent, that they do have to do a gamut of skills, therefore they compensate a high salary.
Okay.
But that salary should still be agreed on without any other influences. And another influence that sometimes come on is the board will have a compensation committee, and they will hire out consultants to decide, to give them their professional opinion of how much a CEO can get paid.
Okay.
Problem is, a lot of times CEOs and those consultants have an unspoken agreement that if you get me a really high salary as CEO, I can then hire you out. I can hire you for my company to do things like decide how much to pay my managers and all that. So it's kind of a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours type deal.
So what you're saying is because the CEO has a potential to give what is it, compensation consultant? Or-
Yes.
Okay, to give the compensation consultant an array of jobs or a certain amount of jobs, then he might be influenced to strongly suggest to the board how much the CEO should get paid?
Yes.
Okay.
So if I've heard you correctly so far,
Mhm.
you've said that the CEO has the gamut of skills and has proven himself over time.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, but I still feel that many biases can go into deciding how much that CEO gets paid.
Mhm.
That still gives him an unfair advantage in the salary committee.
And though I see what you're saying, you know, though the directors might be influenced to pay, you know, to give a certain amount to the CEO, or the compensation consultant might be influenced to raise the salary of the CEO. You know, there's a lot of backdoor politics in that, but I still think that the CEO, if someone were to get paid that certain amount, it would be the CEO because of his array of skills, because he's a public representative of that company. So though I understand where you're coming from, I think the CEO is still fit to get paid that salary.
I guess we're just gonna have to agree to disagree.
I agree.